Master9351 here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about something that I have been asking you guys about on social media, actually. I put a whole bunch of polls out about Skylanders, Spyro, and Crash Bandicoot, and I was wondering what you guys would say. One of the questions I asked was, do you guys think that Crash Bandicoot is going to get his original game this year? Or, sorry, an original game this year. And that wasn't, it was a little different than I expected. You know, I actually got a good many of you saying that you thought that Crash Bandicoot would be getting a new game this year, and that actually really surprised me. It was 25% said yes, 75% said no. I am personally on the no side, but I am going to give some reasons in this video as to why Crash Bandicoot might or might not be getting his own original game this year. I've got a list with reasons for and reasons against, so yeah, without further ado, let's actually dive into talking about why Crash Bandicoot may or may not be getting his own game, and if he is or isn't, when it could be, why it is, what I think. Anyways, let's get started. First things first, Crash Bandicoot got a remaster last year in 2017, and that remaster did pretty well. It was only out for 2 days, or no, 1 day, sorry, in the month of June, and it was the best-selling, the #1 selling game in the month of June, and it was PS4 exclusive, and as I said, it was only out for a single day. So that means that on launch day, it did extremely well. It had a ton of pre-orders, and a lot of hype was there for the game. The game delivered as well. It delivered on the hype. It was just as good as people said it was going to be, and it was definitely a really well done remaster, especially given the fact that they were unable to reuse a lot of the old assets from the original Crash Bandicoot games, and they pretty much just had to start from scratch and use the old games as a template. So given what they actually had to do to remaster the game, it was a very well done remaster, and like I said, it did very, very well. Millions of copies were sold, and so if Activision wants to make yet another Crash Bandicoot game, an original Crash Bandicoot game, they would probably sell quite well as well. Maybe not nearly as well, because of course with a remaster you've got a whole lot of classic fans coming, and the game was so old at this point that a lot of new fans were able to jump in as well. So it's not like it just got the whole remaster hype behind it. No, it was able to draw in a new generation of people to play and enjoy Crash Bandicoot. So, you know, it really did quite well, and it pulled in a good bit of an audience. So if they made another game, I imagine it would do the same. Crash Bandicoot is a long-running and well-recognized IP. Crash Bandicoot is well-recognized throughout the gaming world, and honestly, throughout just the world in general. Like, even my parents knew who Crash Bandicoot was when I told them Crash Bandicoot is getting a remaster and coming to Skylanders. They were like, oh, that's really cool, Crash Bandicoot, yeah, why not? That sounds awesome. So, he's a well-known character, and so the thing is that as they make more games for Crash Bandicoot, that's just gonna help them. You know, if it's a game, you know, if there's a game and nobody knows about it, and it's a new IP and it doesn't really have any form of brand recognition, it's going to be really, really hard to sell those games. And in my opinion, that is why a lot of times, like, anime and like Japanese style games do not do as well over here as more Americanized things, because to a regular everyday person they kind of all look the same and there's very little recognizability with those things. Forgive me if I've offended you if you like Japanese things and you're American, but the thing is that for most Americans you're kind of like, okay, that's an anime, but I don't know what that anime is unless it's like Naruto or something like that. That's just a random example, but the point is that when you have a thing that is not very well recognized, then people are less likely to get into it, less likely to buy it, or anything like that. Crash Bandicoot is well recognized, and so fans would be much more willing to buy into a Crash Bandicoot game because it has maintained the recognizability that it has over the course of, you know, the years, and also the remaster definitely helped to bring back the recognizability that could have been lost by Crash Bandicoot over the years. So again, it's a well-known franchise that sold its first game really, really well. So follow-up games would do really, really well. And there's no more games to remaster within the main line that were actually really good games. So the only logical choice to go from here is to make a new original game in the style of the original 3 Crash Bandicoot games. Believe me when I say that a Crash Bandicoot game is definitely wanted by the fans. The hardcore fans of Crash Bandicoot are begging for a brand new Crash Bandicoot game. It's been years since we've had a Crash Bandicoot game, and it's been decades since we've had a good Crash Bandicoot game. And I know that because I played some of the more recent Crash Bandicoot games when they actually came out, and I did have limited experience with the original Crash games. And let me tell you, the original Crash games are so much better than some of the Crash games that were released later on. So, fans want a new Crash Bandicoot game that is like the originals and that is really, really good. And so, it would sell. It has the recognizability, it's sold well already, and another game is wanted by the fans. So, it would sell pretty well, not only to the hardcore fans, but also, most likely, to some newer fans as well. I already mentioned this, but as I said before, the Crash Remaster actually did not reuse a lot of the old assets from the original games. Typically, when you remaster a game, you can go back to the older games and sort of port some of the files over and kind of, work with what was already there. Well, see, the thing is, with the Crash Bandicoot Remaster, they did not do this. The original files from the original Crash Bandicoot game were not usable on the PS4 at all. So they could not port those files over and, start working on, fixing up the textures to look really good in high definition. No, they couldn't do that. They had to go in, they had to look at all the original files and assets from the original game, and they had to just recreate them in higher resolution. They weren't able to port stuff over. They basically had to build it from scratch. They just had something to work off of. So, it would not be much more difficult to make an original game coding-wise than it was to make the remasters, because the remasters already require brand new files, brand new things to just be created for the PS4. So, in order to make an original game, you'd have to make those files. And the thing is, they already did that for the remaster, so doing it for a new game would not be much more difficult. I will admit, though, that it would still be a little bit more difficult to make an original game than it would be to make the remasters, because at least with the remasters, you had something to go off of. It would kind of be like saying, I'm gonna draw Stealth Elf, the Skylanders character Stealth Elf, when you have a picture to look at of Stealth Elf, and it's like, okay, I can draw Stealth Elf like this, because you have a picture of her to look at. Whereas, if you were like, I'm gonna design Stealth Elf, if you were just like, I'm gonna design a brand new Skylander and make it look as good as Stealth Elf or something like that, that would be considerably harder than just copying down a picture of Stealth Elf. Because, again, you'd actually have to create it. So I will admit, it would still be more difficult to actually make a new game than it would be to just copy the old games in a new file format, but admittedly it would still not be, the gap would not be there, because it's not like they were just able to port everything over for the remaster. They still had to work pretty hard to get it to actually be really good, like it was. And so, the thing is, there just would be less of a gap there between the remasters and a new game. And actually, there would be less stuff to remaster, or to do anyways, because the remaster was 3 full games in one. So, with the expectation that you only need to put one game in this, release, it would probably be less work than the remaster was overall, because the remaster, again, was 3 games, and in this instance, you would just be making one game that would probably be bigger than the original Crash games, but still, it's only one game instead of 3. So now I'm going to kind of play devil's advocate and talk about why I think Crash Bandicoot might not get his own original game made by Activision. So the first major reason that Crash Bandicoot might not actually get its own original game is because Activision is notorious for only wanting its strongest and most profitable franchises to survive. As soon as Guitar Hero stopped making the massive amounts of money, it was done. It was over. As soon as Skylanders stopped being the smash hit that it was, Skylanders took a year break and possibly longer, and we'll know that on the 8th for sure how long that ends up being, that break. So the point is, Activision is known for just axing franchises that are doing perfectly okay. Like, Guitar Hero was not doing terrible. It was not doing great like it once was, but it was not doing, absolutely terrible. It wasn't losing them money. It just wasn't making them as much money as it would like. And the the thing is, Crash Bandicoot, while it did sell pretty darn well for what it was, did not sell as well as Activision's other games. And so, if Activision can make more money by pursuing a different project, then they're going to pursue that different project, even if Crash Bandicoot was successful. Think about it this way. Imagine Crash Bandicoot made them $100 million. Imagine if they could have released literally any other game and it could have made them $200 million. That's the thing. They're going to do, if they can only pick one project to have, then they're going to do the much more profitable one. I mean, they're a business. They kind of have to do that. They have to make the most money that they possibly can. So, given the choice between the two, they're going to take the one that can make them more money. And what could that franchise be? Well, I legitimately have no idea. But I think the thing you kind of got to look at here is what's going to make more money. An original Crash game or a Spyro remaster or literally anything else. To add to this, Crash Bandicoot did do pretty well, as I keep saying. But that being said, it only sold 3.15 million copies. And while 3,150,000 copies is a lot of copies, it's still not as much as literally any Call of Duty game ever. Like Call of Duty World War II sold 8 million and was still considered not to be the best Call of Duty game of all time. It sold almost 8 million, and that number is still going up. Crash just hit 3 million. And so Call of Duty World War II is almost at 8 million. And I forget what the most successful Call of Duty game is. I looked it up. I think it was Modern Warfare 3 is what I want to say is the most successful one. I'm not into COD, so don't judge me if that's wrong. But anyways, the most successful game of all time was like roughly 14 million copies. So that is like 3.5 times what Crash sold, and even World War II, which is like a good game, it sold well for Call of Duty standards, but still not as good as some of them. It sold more than twice, almost 3 times what Crash sold. A failure of a Call of Duty game would be considered a failure if it only sold 3 million copies. Now, granted, this is partly due to Crash Bandicoot being PS4 exclusive. A Call of Duty game on the PS4 may only sell 3 or 4 million units, whereas it globally on all platforms might sell closer to 7 or 8 million and be considered a success. But the thing is, Crash Bandicoot is severely limited by the fact that it is PS4 exclusive, and this could be a contributing factor to them not making more Crash Bandicoot games. Now, this could be solved by Sony allowing them to actually release it on multiple platforms, but honestly, the thing is, it does not benefit Sony to let them do that at all. It actually hurts Sony letting them do it on other platforms, although there is a potential thing where Activision could go to Sony and be like, look, if you don't let us release this on other platforms, we're not releasing it at all. Because then it's kind of like, okay, well, if we keep it on our console and they don't make another game, then we make zero. We make nothing off of that. Whereas if we let them do it on other consoles and then there's still some sales on the PS4, at least we still make some money. So you've kind of got to look at it that way. I'm not sure what Sony's going to do with that because I'm not sure how protective they are of their things. I have heard they are getting a little protective of some of their exclusives, but honestly, I don't know. However, this would definitely be a similar problem with Spyro, although I still think that a Spyro remaster PS4 exclusive would sell more than a PS4 exclusive original Crash Bandicoot game. One other thing that I wanted to briefly talk about is that honestly, Crash Bandicoot's advertisement and marketing has been slightly limited. It has not been a giant advertising campaign. So it does not look like Activision is trying to strongly promote Crash Bandicoot. And I know that Crash has not really been talked about very much since its release. And I don't really know what to say on this because I am not a huge Crash fan. I have the game, but I'm not a huge Crash fan. I can't say that I follow every single bit of Crash Bandicoot news. However, I would think that if they were trying to sort of keep the series alive, then they would probably be promoting it a little bit more than they have been already. I know that Crash Bandicoot has its own social media, but still, it is not really promoted that much in Activision since the release of its DLC. Like, I have not heard much about it since then, and of course it's because, there's nothing new to it, but still, I don't know, I feel like it's been a little limited. And again, I just feel like if Activision was really trying to create a steamroller of a franchise, they would probably have marketed it a little bit more. A final thing that I want to say about this is that the Crash Bandicoot remaster is almost definitely, or not remaster, sorry, original game is almost definitely not coming out this year. While I do think that there eventually will be a Crash Bandicoot original game, like way down the road, I don't think it's coming this year at all. And the reason for that is because, well, the remaster was literally just released last year, and they probably wanted to see how it was actually doing. But I also think that Spyro is getting a remaster, and I don't think that they're going to try to promote both Crash and Spyro at the same time. Now, what I could theoretically eventually see happening, like way down the road, is a Crash game, and then a Spyro game, and then a Crash game, and then a Spyro game. I could see that, or it could be an interesting pattern where it's actually like a 4-year gap, where it's like a Crash game, and then a Spyro game 2 years later, and then a Crash game 2 years later. And at this point, that is what I think is actually most likely, and that is what I'll talk about a little bit more in my Activision's master plan for the Skylanders franchise and beyond video, because I definitely think that with Spyro and Crash, they're going to get into a release cycle, a 4-year release cycle, with one coming every 2 years. I think that's the most likely thing at this point, given that we think that there is a Spyro remake coming, you know, pretty soon. But I will talk more about that in that video. But that being said, I definitely don't think an original Crash game is coming this year, which is why when I did that poll on Instagram asking you guys if you thought that Crash would be getting an original game this year, I was really surprised at the fact that 25% of you guys said that you did think Crash was getting his own game that was original this year, because I really don't think he is, because, like, guys, they're not going to make an original Crash game before the remaster even came out. That's just unrealistic. They're not going to invest that much money into something that could be a complete and utter failure. So, with that in mind, I definitely don't think it's coming this year, although I would not rule it out for, you know, down the road. So what is my opinion? Well, I've already talked a little bit about it. I think that eventually what's going to happen is we're going to get a 4-year release schedule for Spyro and Crash, because I definitely think a Spyro remaster is coming. As I said, Crash remaster definitely, or I keep saying remaster. Crash original game this year? No way. No way. Spyro remaster this year? Maybe, but probably not until next year. It'll probably be announced this year, but not released until next year. So that leaves us in an interesting situation. If there's not a Crash game this year, and Spyro is coming next year, then when could an original Crash game be coming? And my answer is not for a really long time. Now, I don't know this for sure. Activision could come out this year and say that a new Crash game is in development and will be released, you know, next year alongside a Spyro remake. Or they could not even do a Spyro remake at all and instead just focus on the Crash franchise. But honestly, guys, the most likely path forward that I see for both the Crash and Spyro franchises is a Crash remaster came in 2017, a Spyro remaster will come in 2019, and an original Crash game will not come until 2020 or 2021. 2021, maybe that's a little far off. Maybe they'll say 2020, and maybe it'll be, you know, not that far off, but honestly, not for a really long while, in my opinion, at least on an original Crash game. But hey, that's just what I think, and that is just the conclusion that I have reached looking at all of the evidence that we have, and I will be talking again a little bit more about that in my Activision's master plan video coming up the first week in February. Anyways, though, that is all I have for you guys, but what I want to know is, tell me down in the comments what you think about Crash Bandicoot getting an original game. Do you think he's going to get an original game at some point? If he does get an original game, is it still going to be PS4 exclusive? What year is it going to come out? What do you guys think about that down in the comments? And if you have anything that you'd like to say about this video, please leave that down in the comments. If it seems really choppy, it's because I keep having coughing spasms because I'm still not over this cold, and I'm literally yelling at the camera all the time for like 15 minutes, so it kind of gets to you. So if it seems a little choppy, you guys know why. But anyways, that's all I have for you guys. Like I said, tell me down in the comments what you think. This has been Portal Master 9351. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.